Welcome to the July forecast, everybody. This month has some exciting developments, some sharp pivots, and some incredible new beginnings. It's going to be, okay, let me start. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the July forecast. So this month is very interesting. We have some exciting developments, some sharp pivots, and some incredible new beginnings. It's really going to depend on your personal astrology in July as to how you feel it. For each of us, though, I'm hopeful this month is generally less tense and turbulent than what we've experienced so far, even though we've had a little bit of a gentle entry into Jupiter in Cancer in June, which may have helped us heal, recover, and soften areas of life that have been really more difficult in late 2024 and early 2025. There were some harder aspects in June that we just won't have in July. But it's not without its challenges. We will have a Mercury retrograde. We will have an intense new moon, and we will have Mars conjunct the South Node. But on a personal level, you're apt to discover new facets of yourself, maybe have the opportunity to release some bad habits and confront some limiting beliefs, and even reimagine what's possible moving into this dynamic and dramatically evolving future. Specifically, July, August, and part of September are involving astrology that are really going to characterize next summer and moving forward for the next few years. So it's a pivotal time because it opens the door to what we can expect in the near future. So, this talk will also touch on some sobering reflections about the world at large. I'm not one of those astrologers who's predicting World War III, and I remain resolutely optimistic about the fate of humanity. However, I do see some troubling alignments for the United States on the horizon that could bring some stressful headlines. Be mindful how you consume information in July. The uptick of news is probably going to be substantial. And for some, it might feel overwhelming and a little chaotic. Human beings really were not built to know everything all the time, as we are getting pummeled with news from all corners of the world at this point. Our nervous systems just can't function in that kind of overload. So I suggest you pretend it's 1980 and you can only get news once a day. Titrate your exposure to live video coverage as well. Okay, let me do this. Okay, let's get into it. So, July brings the historic and unprecedented shift of our age. This is the harmonious alignment of all the outer planets, which began when Pluto entered Aquarius November 19th for the final time, and followed by Neptune entering Aries on March 30th, and then Saturn entering Aries on May 24th. On July 7th, Uranus enters Gemini and previews the summer of 2026. This formation in summer 2026 that French astrologer Andre Barbeau has decided this formation in summer 2026 that French astrologer Andre Barbeau has described as the most benefic configuration of the century. A splendid relaunch of civilization, human beings surpassing themselves while experiencing life on a higher level, and the coming together of rational and spiritual mind and soul. That sounds pretty utopian. And I will have a little bit of a caveat here to this. But French astrologer Andre Barbeau is a master astrologer who passed away in 2019, who predicted things like the pandemic. He predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall. He predicted 9/11. So he has a good track record, and I'm holding on to his quote about this configuration because it gives me hope, and I hope it will give you some hope as well. He describes the trine of Pluto and Uranus aligned by a sextile to Saturn and Neptune as heralding a mini golden age and a period of enlightenment of humanity coming together. Now, it is weird that Donald Trump used the term golden age when he was coming into office. I don't know what to say about that. It is a weird coincidence. However, thinking about this prediction, it does not at all sound like the world that we're living in right now. We don't hear a lot of astrologers talking about a golden age. There are some. S.J. Anderson is one to look up on YouTube. Most folks are predicting World War III, and these are the people that will fall into your feed because they have the most dramatic predictions. I'm somewhere in the middle here. I think that and I'm going to go into it in detail here, but I think we can expect an elevation of consciousness. And I think we're starting to see that emerge for each of us individually right now. And that speaks very much to this highly compatible concentration of air and fire energy. Air is the intellect in astrology. Fire is the inspiration. And when these come together in this kind of outer planet alignment that we're having, we can expect this mind-blowing transcendence to begin to be part of the cultural awakening. So if you tune into yourself right now, it's very likely that something very new and unusual is beginning to surface in your consciousness. And our first response to this newness might be fear or confusion. If you pay attention to that, it has something to show you about your evolving sense of self and what role you will play in this unfolding of life that we're all experiencing right now. On a more global level, this alignment can look like the unraveling of the established order to make room for a new one. There's a historical and a sociological theory behind this phase of the societal deconstruction that we're witnessing. Sociologists William Strauss and Neil Howe called this era the fourth turning in their 1997 book of the same name. They describe this as a time of upheaval and revolution that establishes a new world order from the ashes of the old. By their measure, America has been in this quote unquote fourth turning since 2005 to 2008. And this coincides with Pluto in Capricorn and the escalation of the Iraq War and the Great Recession. So Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, and it was there off and on until November 19th, 2024. The fourth turning is the last of a 4-phase cycle. So we would have been in this already since 2008 at least. And before while this is concluding, it's kind of like this crescendo moment because this fourth turning is the last of a 4-phase cycle before we reach what these sociologists have called the high. And the high, in their estimation, sounds a lot like French astrologer Andre Barbeau's golden age, mini golden age, an era of renewal and strong institutions, of societal confidence, collective progress based on shared values. And according to Howe and Strauss, the climax or resolution of the fourth turning period is 2025 to 2030. This is the timeline that really aligns with Barbeau's mini golden age. So it may get more dramatic before we reach this period of the transcendence. That doesn't mean we're not going to reach it, though. So this is into this context, I want to talk about Uranus entering Gemini for the first time since the United States entered World War II. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor just 2 months after Uranus ingressed back into Taurus after spending 2 months in early Gemini. So in that phase that Uranus entered Gemini for the first time during that World War II phase, Uranus was at a very similar place in the sky that it is now and that it will be until next spring. And it's true that the last 3 times Uranus entered Gemini, the United States has been at war. As it will be this summer and next, Uranus was in the early degrees of Gemini from August 1941 to May 1942, as it will be July to November 2025, and May 2026 to May 2028. It was also in early degrees of Gemini in June 1858, when Lincoln made his famous House Divided speech about slavery that laid the groundwork for the Civil War. The war began in 1861, April 1861, with Neptune at 0 degrees Aries and Uranus at 9 degrees Gemini. Uranus will be at 9 degrees Gemini again, July to November 2027 and May 2028. During this time, Neptune was also in the first decan of Aries, as it will be for the next 5 years. So we have similarities, right? So I don't want to be Pollyanna about the astrology. It is sobering, to say the least. Before that, Uranus entered Gemini in June of 1774 with Pluto in Aquarius. So we had a lot of similarity in 1774 because we also had Pluto in Aquarius with Uranus in Gemini. By April 1775, just a few months later, the famous shot heard round the world started the Revolutionary War. During that time, we also had eclipses taking place in the Virgo Pisces place. Same as this year. So we have a lot in common around America's birthday that we had when we were born as a nation. So it would make sense that there is a lot of dis-ease fomenting, sort of that revolutionary spirit. Today, Pluto is at the same degree it was during a particularly bleak period during the Revolutionary War and the economically depressed times post-Revolutionary War. However, that was also the same period that America declared victory against the British and set the whole nation, began. We will have the same alignment in spring of 2027 that we had when America had declared its victory against the British. So we're on that threshold, right, of some very big pivots right now, historically, astrologically. One side note that I found while I was doing this research that was interesting is that New York's state constitution was adopted with astrology very similar to next year. So by April 1777, New York adopted its state constitution just as Jupiter transited Cancer, Uranus transited Gemini, and Pluto entered Aquarius. So we have lots in common. So New York as a state is also experiencing some very major pivots that could define, the next 100 years and maybe even 200 years of its lifespan. So the difference between a lot of this, okay, none of these other historical moments had exactly the same astrology we have now. The difference that makes this moment, I'd say, even more significant and possibly even more positive is that we have this harmonious alignment between these revolutionary Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini placements, making this supportive sextile to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Considering the chart of the United States, we can see how this moment reflects the mood and themes of the 3 other times the United States was at war. And in 2 of these cases, you could say the nation was at war with itself and struggling to define a new identity. That's certainly the case now. So we can expect difficult times ahead as a nation, and there's reason still to have faith in humanity. And that's because while we have a lot of war signatures, we also have this incredible arrangement of outer planets that is unique to human history. We've never had Saturn and Neptune making positive alignments with Pluto and Uranus, which are making a positive alignment to each other. We've never had that before. This will not compare to anything we've experienced in our lifetimes or in history. In the past, we've had similar combinations. We've had Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune. And even if we took one of those bring enormous leaps in technology and psychological and spiritual awakening and consciousness expansion on par with the Enlightenment, the birth of quantum physics, the birth of the printing press, things that changed our entire idea of reality. But this time, once Uranus enters Gemini, July 7th, we have 3 years with all 3 of these combinations at once. So this is the mass evolution of consciousness, and it's likely to accelerate dramatically in the next 3 years. And perhaps these forces larger than us, maybe it is a world war on some scale. Maybe it's not declared that way, but maybe there's so much catastrophe that we are forced to change our sense of coming together. We are forced to come together in some new and surprising way, maybe using technology. So we can expect this time to birth societal movements that help change history. We can expect the end of one kind of leadership and the birth of a new kind. We can expect a new world order. Difficult times will unify large swaths of the population. And the challenge will be to come together, maybe despite ideological differences, but some kind of shared value that all of humanity can agree on. This is how we build a new kind of society that supports the whole. Maybe we finally get to discover the veracity of extra dimensional beings. But there's no way we leave this era without a transcendent leap in consciousness. So new technology, new scientific revolution, and new societal movements, new political parties will likely be a part of this evolution. And maybe we will see this scientific confirmation for things like multidimensional consciousness, such as channeling, remote viewing, telepathy, things that have up to this point been considered metaphysical or completely crazy, may get some kind of scientific confirmation. This is how profoundly different this astrology is. We may not even have language for what is coming. So for each of us personally, this next 2 months will give us a preview of how the next few years will redefine our world. We'll get a call to be our best selves for this chapter, whatever that looks like for you. We'll be called forward in unique ways depending on our gifts. So it is a really good time to ask yourself, who are you becoming? Who do you want to be? What new part of you is emerging? And how will you live into that in the next 3 years? So I don't want to build any panic, because I think we are uniquely positioned, prepared for this moment, whatever it comes for us. We were born for this time. And so it's important that we take care of ourselves, take care of our bodies, stay awake to what is really happening around you. Stay aware. Don't dissociate. Try not to disappear into social media or disappear into your fantasy. Now is a time to be very real with yourself about where you are in your life and where you want to get to. What needs to be changed can be changed now. This is a really positive moment for stepping into a new perspective, a new paradigm, for being more authentically you, for casting off any of the false selves that you've been carrying all your life, maybe, for really being fearlessly authentic. It's kind of like this now or never moment where you are already probably sensing what is changing, what is evolving for you. And I want to just say, trust that, trust that. You don't necessarily have to know how it's going to evolve. Just listen to what is coming forward, listen to what is emerging for you. It will become known when it's needed to be known. So try not to get too overwhelmed by the enormity of our age. It is just a lot of change to take in. And that's why I really, really guide you to titrate your intake of information, um, because overwhelm, overstimulation, anxiety, and panic are absolutely not going to help you in this instance. Being clear, having a grounded sense of yourself and your surroundings is probably the approach we want to take. Okay, so that's the big picture. Now let's narrow in and dig into the more, I'm going to say, more mundane, more day-to-day alignments. So in July, Mercury will station retrograde on July 17th to August 9th in the sign of Leo. This retrograde involves a pretty powerful and intense new moon in Leo on July 24th. The major alignment of this retrograde, though, will be its involvement in the ongoing New World Order, or in your personal life, the ongoing paradigm shift that's happening for you. And this might be a very private paradigm shift. It doesn't necessarily mean your life is disassembling. It could be just something really deep within you that you're realizing is very different. Mercury retrogrades usually demand flexibility and patience. This one will challenge an area of your life that you generally like to have under control. Leo is a fixed sign. So you may need to check your temper at times and watch how you respond to inconvenience and misunderstanding. You might want to reserve or set aside the need to be right in this situation. Instead, use this period to get creative, to rethink the ways you seek out fun, to reconnect with old friends and creative collaborators, to redefine yourself and reassess your brand. This isn't the time for impulse texting, for reaching out to an ex, though that might feel tempting. Typically, when you do that, you don't get the reunion you really want. And in this case, any reunion may not last past August. What else do I want to say about Mercury retrograde? I do have a little workshop that I can post about tips for navigating Mercury retrograde based on the sign of your natal Mercury. So I will post a link to that below this video. So the next big lunation we have is the Capricorn full moon. And this happens on July 10th. This Capricorn full moon is cranky and overworked. It might illuminate just where you are overfunctioning and how that behavior can backfire. The two planets in charge of this lunation, Mars and Saturn, are either overwhelmed and ill-equipped, as Saturn in Aries is when it is conjunct Neptune, or 10 days away from complete collapse because Mars in Virgo, the ruler of that Saturn, is going to conjoin the South Node on June 20th. So I would say pace yourself around this full moon. We're all having to struggle a bit harder to articulate our feelings around this one. And though we have a lot of them, we may be trying to power through or not express our pain. There's a need for stability, for sort of managerial support and executive function, but we seem to be shouting into the void and unable or unwilling to meet the demands put upon us. This isn't the end of the discussion, though. If you are having a hard time around this full moon, understand that Mercury in Leo is going to have the last word. There's a lot to process, revisit, and edit in late July and August due to the Mercury retrograde. The next two new moons will be an attempt to resolve whatever comes to light around the Capricorn full moon due to the route Mercury will take during its retrograde. So right before this full moon on July 4th, we have the station of Neptune. Saturn, wait, let me back up. So next I want to talk about the stationing of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. On July 4th, Neptune stations retrograde, and on July 12th, Saturn stations retrograde. This happens every year and isn't really personally significant unless your sun, moon, or rising sign is ruled by Saturn. That means if you have a sun, moon, or rising in Capricorn or Aquarius, or in this case, you have sun, moon, or rising in the early degrees of Aries. Nevertheless, this is the first time we've had these two planets stationing in this place in the sky and hovering at these key points for a full month. So note in your natal chart, where is 1 and 2 degrees Aries? That is where you're going to feel the intensification of Saturn and Neptune. A stationing period for any planet intensifies the themes of the planet and the sign that they're in. In this case, Neptune is likened to a haze or fog, delusion, or lovely daydream that can overtake you. This is a more subtle, sleepy vibe, again, unless you have the sun, moon, or rising at 0 to 5 Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. Neptune in Aries is a signature for missionary zeal that inspires us to fight for our beliefs. It's a signature of misguided, violent religious zealots as well. When Neptune stations in Aries, we may grow more invested in our own personal mythology, more willing to go to battle against anyone who challenges that part of us. We may become re-inspired to self-actualize, to cultivate more faith in ourselves, to confront self-limiting beliefs, and to rediscover a faith community. We may become more confused about where we stand too. We may need help clearly seeing our vision through. Saturn in Aries is the signature of the fallen hero or the ill-equipped leader, the troubled father figure, the reported loneliness epidemic among men. This is a signature that Saturn in Aries can be associated with. Broadly speaking, Saturn rules our systems, structures, routines, work ethic, parent figures, our responsibilities, obligations, and fear. It's the archetype of the hermit, the taskmaster, the grim reaper, and the father. Saturn brings about endings and establishes limits and tests your mettle. It shows us the limits of faith, the bounds of reality, and the consequences, both good and bad. When Saturn stations retrograde, we slow down and reassess work routines, responsibilities, limits, obligations. We reconsider the hierarchies in our life and where we land on them. We reestablish boundaries or we reconsider them. And we might dig in to do the work or establish new ways of distributing it. With Saturn retrograde in Aries, we may be challenged to confront our fraud complexes and face our fears of failure. We may reconstitute a stronger sense of self as a result of doing these things. So the journey of the self is a big theme in July, as Saturn, Neptune, and also Chiron and Aries are stationing in this place all month. So take some time to consider what you've learned about yourself since March. What fears have emerged for you? What stale beliefs have begun to lift and evolve? And where are you still harboring insecurity around being yourself? What needs to happen for you to accept the divine version of you? It's worth noting that both these planets fall at the degree of America's Imam Cheli, which is called the IC, which is the deepest part of a natal chart. And in America's chart, it represents the land that we live on. So both of these planets fall at the degree of America's IC, 1 Aries. This suggests a complete breakdown of our nation's mythology. This alignment is the signature of the early years of the Civil War, when Americans were displaced, their lives uprooted, and their sense of unity fractured. And aren't we seeing that? Since Saturn entered Aries in May, we have seen people being pulled off the streets and taken away, American citizens. We have seen the divisiveness that has brought up in this country. And so we really are at war with ourselves in a lot of ways, because our government is seizing our citizens. And it seems as if we don't have any control over it. So we see these mass demonstrations of people out in the streets. I do think we're going to continue to see that. With Saturn in this place through spring of 2026, it's likely that we'll continue to see the dissolution of old beliefs about being American and the complete reset of national identity. Americans may begin to redefine their values independent of political affiliation after experiencing deception by ill-equipped leadership. Now, I have assembled all of these words based on the placement of the planets Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries in the United States chart. So this brings us to the Mercury retrograde in Leo. This impacts most all fixed sign placements and points from 4 degrees to 15 degrees. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. Specifically, Leo's born July 26th to August 7th. So Mercury will retrograde from July 17th to August 11th. And the standard advice for Mercury retrograde is try not to sign contracts that are irrevocable. Make space in your schedule for delays, breakdowns, and misunderstandings. Resist the need to be right, which is a big ask when the planet of perspective, Mercury, is in the sign of the diva, Leo, through September 2nd. While Mercury in Leo is retrograde, it will travel unencumbered by most other planets. That means it's not being aspected. It's just kind of out there doing its thing without having to answer to really any other planet aside from the sun. And for a large portion of this, the sun is in Leo also. So like a rock star surrounded by sycophants, it may be hard to hear no during this time. Watch for maverick, outspoken, self-righteous people to place themselves in your path, particularly if you're an Aquarius rising. And also brace yourself for revelatory moments of self-discovery, reunions with your most colorful old friends, and creative renewal. The only 3 aspects this Mercury retrograde makes while in Leo is this bubbly and friendly sextile to Venus in Gemini on July 18th, suggesting an easy time with old friends for fun outings. And then the next is a Mercury cazimi on July 31st, which can bring a mix of good news and creative breakthroughs. And then what was the other one? There was a third one. Hold on a second. That's it. Yeah, that is it. Let's make sure. Yeah. All right, so that brings me to the Mars conjunct the South Node at 19 Virgo. For those of you who know eclipses, you will understand the South Node as an eclipse point. It is in astrology the place of release, of drain, of can be the place of loss, of surrender, of lack of control, of purge. And from the week of from July 13th to July 20th, Mars will be within orb of a conjunction to the South Node. Mars is typically considered problematic, the South Node problematic. When those two come together, we can expect some problems in the Virgo place. These don't have to be life altering problems, but we may be negotiating some things that we don't have a lot of control over. Personally, this is a strong signature for change of direction due to having to release the past, purge bad habits, and maybe habits that are Virgo in nature, such as perfectionism, self criticism, over functioning. This is a good time to detox your diet, to purge your closets, to organize your desk, or leave a toxic job environment. And just consider where you try too hard to fix or control. This is the time frame that you stop doing that, or maybe are forced to stop doing that. This alignment also triggers both the chart of the United States and Donald Trump. It could ding Donald Trump's confidence, his sense of control, his bank account, forcing him to take a loss and pivot. In the United States chart, this relatively rare alignment has been a signature for plane hijackings that are aimed at America. And this is where it gets a little sobering. I don't want to suggest that we're going to necessarily see a hijacking. We may actually see one foiled because it's a signature for that as well. The last two times we had Mars in Virgo conjoining the South Node in Virgo was August 9th, 2006, 3 weeks before. So the last time we had this was in August of 2006. On August 9th, 2006, 3 weeks before the actual conjunction with Mercury in Virgo Cazimi. Now that's an important note because Mercury in Virgo is exalted. Cazimi is a kind of exaltation. So even though this was a difficult alignment, there was a supportive thing happening. So this is what happened on that day. 24 suspected Al Qaeda associates were arrested in and around London for conspiring to detonate liquid explosives disguised as soft drinks aboard 7 London-based flights bound for San Francisco, Washington, Montreal, Toronto, New York, and Chicago. So they were actually caught before they had the opportunity to do this. But to this day, we are not allowed to carry much liquid on the plane because of this very instance. I look at that Mercury and Virgo Cazimi as information, maybe undercover agents, people who had really good intelligence foiled what could have been an absolute calamitous, deadly situation. The last time before that was September of 1970. So this doesn't happen very often. From September 6th to September 9th, 1970, just as Mars conjoined the South Node at 2 Virgo, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine hijacked the New York-bound flights from Zurich, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Bahrain, and forced them to land on a remote desert airstrip in Jordan. There were no people killed during that, but that was terrifying for those people involved. Let me make sure I have that correct here. So, in that, what is the so called Dawson Field hijackings, no one was killed. Um, the majority of the 310 hostages were transferred to Amman and freed on September 11th, which is very weird. The rest of the hostages were released on September 30th. So it was terrifying, but it ended with the hostages safely returned home. So let's hope that doesn't happen. It's just interesting to note the similarities, the consistency of that and plane hijackings. Okay, let me get to. So that brings me to the Leo new moon on July 24th. This is potent, but it is also exciting. And let me unpack this. We're charged with the energy of an inspired new mission that requires courage and faith despite uncertainty. This may come after fighting a losing battle with hard work and self sacrifice. Everything in this chart points to the sovereign part of you that's done playing second. It's time to reimagine what's possible. The seeds planted around this new moon will expand beyond your wildest dreams by July 29th, 2026. So be careful what you wish for here. You might be so enthusiastic about the future and the exhilarating promise of change that you miss some details. It is happening on a Mercury retrograde. Just leave room for mistakes. This is a moment to take the big leap and then fine tune as you go. This is an opportunity to stand up to the bully or commit to the overwhelming task of redefining yourself in a high stakes moment. There's an unprecedented level of support for far reaching creative reinvention and transformation. On a societal level, there's considerable tension between a power hungry system and the purpose driven individuals refusing to cede ground. This sounds like another standoff between a very famous Leo rising president, Donald Trump, and his public. So, this is the astrology of disputes between the ruling class and the people that establish an entirely new paradigm in opposition to that ruling class. So, this is the big overview of the astrology of July. As you can see, there is a lot to unpack. And I will be doing this with more refinement when I go through the July horoscopes. But I would say brace yourself for some pretty impactful news and some pretty important self revelation, some self awareness, some creative awakenings. And just stay grounded. I think that would be my number one advice, is to know yourself and stay in the moment, because we're about to get into the future. We're about to step right into the future in July. All right, everybody. Thanks so much.